So for a little while now, I've been doing daily uploads on both Instagram and YouTube of 1-minute videos either talking about or reviewing action figures. This video right here is a compilation of those videos regarding the 4-inch Jakks specific Sonic the Hedgehog action figures. If you enjoyed the video and you want to see more things like this, make sure you follow the YouTube Shorts feed or my Instagram Reels. I mean, I do upload on TikTok too, but no one follows it. Volume 2 of this will be released after I make enough shorts regarding the topic. I have been a Sonic fan for more than 15 years, and out of all the Sonic the Hedgehog action figure lines that have ever been made, I would say the Jakks specific 4-inch Sonic figures have been the best. Prior to this point, the only figure series that has ever come close to being comparable to this were the Jazzwares 3-inch figures. However, due to their smaller scale, sculpts constantly being compromised by how many joints there were, and honestly not being the most durable things in the world, as figures, they are honestly not my favorite. And all those gripes I just listed have been alleviated with the current 4-inch figures being made. However, the thing that made the Jazzwares 3 inches so goated was that it was the most comprehensive figure line that we ever had as fans for the series. However, Jakks Specific has been releasing a large variety of figures, including some that I've never had once prior. So it's on its way to dethrone Jazzwares in that regard as well. While not every single Jakks figure is perfect, for $10 figures, some of these are like insane when you consider these are like $10 figures. Like how the f is Big the Cat that cheap? For the Jakks specific Sonic the Hedgehog figures, some characters look better in the 3-inch scale while others look better in the 4-inch scale. With some mild exceptions, the general rule of thumb is that if the character comes from the modern series of video games, they look better in the 4-inch scale. However, if they're the classic version of themselves, you should probably get the 3-inch version. The reason for this is that canonically, the classic characters are quite noticeably shorter in scale compared to the modern counterparts. But if you look at the classic 4-inch figures, they're like massive. And for the modern characters, the sculpts tend to take a huge hit when they get shrunk down to 3 inches. While there is an argument where the 3-inch modern Sonic figure scales well against 6-inch action figures, the 4-inch line is actually perfect if you're trying to go for a Super Smash Bros. Collection, because in that game, short characters oftentimes get a size increase. The one classic character I say you must get in 4-inch scale though is Dr. Robotnik. Not only is it my favorite sculpt out of any of the Jakks Sonic figures, the height difference is perfect for 3-inch little animals. I consider this Sonic figure a must-have for any fan of the series. While it may not be perfect, when you consider its weight division, it's an incredibly good offer. Typically when you run across $10 toys, you run into a lot of problems with sculpt accuracy, range of articulation, or durability. And luckily, you don't have to worry about any of those issues with the Sonic figure. The one thing I would say you'd have to be concerned with this figure, and the rest of the line as well, is paint application. When you're buying it, make sure you do so in person in a store so you can make sure that none of the paint goes, anywhere wonky. I've seen a lot of white from the eyes overextending onto the muzzle, and in the case of my Sonic figure, some of the orange on its lip has gotten a little bit too far down. Speaking of which, the orange lips are really the only main thing I dislike about this figure, but I preferred this variant over the teeth variant. What I absolutely adore and is rare for a figure of this character is the fact that there's actually a little bit of an ankle pivot so you can actually stand up by leaning forward a little bit, counteracting the weight from his spines. I consider Shadow the Hedgehog as one of the best figures in the Jakks specific 4-inch figure line. Easily in the top 3, above Sonic actually. While I do think that the Sonic figure gets a lot of things right, all of that applies to Shadow as well, but then there's a couple additional things that Shadow has that Sonic doesn't. The first thing is that Shadow is really the only 4-inch Sonic figure that actually uses proper gold paint on the gold elements of his design. Every other character, including Sonic, uses just a flat yellow color, which makes it look really toy-like. Which granted, they are toys, but the line tries to hit this happy in-between of being satisfying to collectors as well as also kids who want to play with them. And the little extra pop from the actual gold makes it feel more like a collector item. And the second thing Shadow has going in his favor is more so just his core design color choice. With Sonic's blue, you can see some of like the seam lines and kind of the manufacturing roughness, but Shadow's black covers up most of that. Aside from paint messiness, which varies per figure, the only thing I dislike on the Shadow is the red line on his mouth. It would have looked better if it was just black. They haven't made a whole lot of action figures for the modern Amy Rose design. And while this is the most recent option, and better than a lot of the previous choices, it's not a perfect figure. For starters, I think the design would benefit greatly from having more of a neutral resting face expression. Between the toothless smile, minimized hammer, and awkward connection point for the leg, if you're not careful with your posing, you can make her look like just just like a big baby with a rattle. And last thing I need on my shelf is a diaper fur. One way to alleviate this problem greatly is have her not hold her hammer, which I would actually recommend this for a further reason as well. I actually have two of these figures, one that never holds her hammer and one that's always holding her hammer. And the one that's always holding her hammer, the paint from the handle has been completely stripped off, staining her glove. If you can find a figure for the original price, it's not a terrible purchase, but if you buy it for any level of markup, you're going to be paying too much. If you're a huge fan of the series or character, I'd be like, yeah, go ahead and pick it up. But if you're only more casually into Sonic, there's other things I'd sooner recommend. I hate to say it, but if there's a Jakks specific Sonic figure that needs to be overhauled and re-released, it would be the Tails figure. For starters, you have like a lot of design issues with the figure itself. His mouth is at this uncanny position where I can't really tell if it's either just kind of slightly open but not really, or if he just has really pronounced red lips. The spinner tail variant can't properly spin around without hitting the back of his head, and for the one with the tails at a neutral position, there's no ball joint being able to tilt it downwards. It's just hanging there, and it makes it hard to pose him without having him fall over. But regardless of variant, there is one common problem spot that you have to watch out for with this figure, and it's around the nose ridge where the white of the muzzle meets the yellow of the head. These are two separate pieces of plastic that then get connected together during the manufacturing. However, on the yellow part of the head, you oftentimes find warping in between the eyes. You can see this on my tails with the spinning tails. I would definitively not recommend this figure, but if you do unfortunately buy them, do so at a retailer so you can pick out the best one. To cut to the chase, I would recommend this Metal Sonic figure if you do like Metal Sonic. However, there are two things that you should probably be aware of before purchasing him. Number one is his elbow articulation. His right arm bends forward and backwards while his left arm only bends side to side. And there's no form of swivel, so you're kind of stuck with this weird asymmetry. And if you're somebody who cares about Metal Sonic having actual metallic colors rather than being a matte gray, the Jakks specific gold release only adds that finishing to the red and the blue. For me personally, the thing that bothers me more is the asymmetrical elbows, especially given the fact that there's actually a swivel joint in the knee articulation. And whenever they do a re-release of this figure, I really hope that they fix that. I also just remembered back when I got this thing, the connection between the elbow and the forearm wasn't pushed in all the way. It was an easy fix, just boil some hot water in the microwave, soak the figure into hot water a little bit, the plastic just gets a little looser from the heat, so then you can push the joints in a little better. So yeah, maybe something to be a little wary of before buying. Espio the Chameleon is a character that has a lot of similarities to Sonic himself. And at first glance, you might be thinking, oh yeah, this is basically the same as the Sonic Jakks specific 4-inch figure. However, there's a couple weird deviations with the Espio figure that are worth highlighting. One that I actually do like is the choice of black paint for his mouth, rather than the orange used for Sonic. But then the feet chose a weird solution to the whole entire being back heavy problem. Sonic has a little bit of ankle articulation so you can make him lean forward, while Espio they decided to just make his feet really long. And the way Espio's wrist articulation is done is only at the glove, while Sonic's cuff also rotated with his hand. I mean, it's all serviceable, however it's kind of oddly inconsistent from the rest of the line, and I prefer the prior established standard. But even with that, I still would recommend the figure if you are a fan of the character. Let's put it this way, if Sonic was an A, Espio would be a B. It's not bad, but A's and A pluses also do still exist within the line. Thank goodness the Vector the Crocodile figure can actually close his mouth, and there's actually a point of articulation there, because when I saw all the product photos and how he's positioned in the box, he has his mouth open and he looks a little doofy. But close his mouth, really the only thing that aesthetically is an issue is maybe the eyes looking a little wall-eyed in some positions. But the sculpt, range of articulation, and size of this figure is really generous for a $10 release. The weird thing with the Jakks 4-inch scale Sonic figures, the general rule of thumb is that the larger the figure gets, the higher quality and better value the figure is. But if a character is skewing on kind of the smaller side, talking Tails and modern Robotnik here, the quality tends to dip down. So far, the three big figures for the line have been Vector, Omega, and Big the Cat. And out of all those three, which I would recommend, I would actually say Vector is my least favorite. It's not so phenomenal that I would recommend them to non-fans, while almost paradoxically, I consider him a must-have for a Sonic fan. At the very least, the ones who played Sonic Heroes. Despite being Queen of the Furries, Rouge the Bat, oddly enough, has only had one figure released prior to this one, and that was for a Sonic X toy line back in the 2000s. There were other figures planned, but they got canceled. So for a character who's a mainstay for the franchise, for better or for worse, she's been long overdue for a new figure. And for this installment in the Jakks specific 4-inch figure line, she's not a bad one, but definitely has quirks. Oddly enough, Rouge is one of the only animal characters to have both elbows and knees, but she can't really use them because of her cuffs. She's also the only character with articulation points cut directly through her gloves and her boots. Combine this with also her head kind of being smaller compared to the other ones. She's good, but she almost feels like she's from a completely different figure line. Also, her wings are articulated on a hinge joint, and they tend to pop out, but you can pop them back in easy. It's not a big deal, but it's a little annoying. Look, there's only 2 types of people who are going to buy this thing, and all I'm going to say is my excuse is diehard Sonic fan.
My beautiful furry queen.
E123 Omega, one of my all-time favorite Sonic characters, and that's probably because he looks a lot like a Bionicle from Lego. And it's completely psycho to me that like Sonic Heroes is like over 20 years old at this point, and it took until now for him to get a figure. And what's even weirder feeling is that his figure is also the best release within his line. Like, this is a $10 figure. A $10 figure with like every single point of articulation you would want for this character. A $10 figure with an exceptionally accurate sculpt. A $10 figure with an insanely clean paint job. Like, add some swappable hands and a metallic finish, and this could easily be like a $35, $40 figure. Like, if you just like robot action figures, not even just Sonic, robot action figures, buy this figure. It's an absolute steal. Funny enough, there's actually 2 variants of this figure because this one was the original first run, which actually had an error. The gray around Omega's eyes are actually supposed to be black. But regardless if you got the accurate or inaccurate version, this figure still looks great.